In computer science, we have something called a for loop, which is basically a control flow statement for specifying iterations. So say you have an array which has 100 different values in it, and say the numbers 1 to 100. So you have 100 different indexes in your array, and you want to console.log each index. What if I told you you could do that instead of writing 100 lines of code in just a couple lines of code? Is that something you might be interested in?
Yes, I would.
Great, then let me introduce you to the JavaScript for loop. Now what we have here is a JavaScript for loop, and basically a for loop contains a few different things. It contains the keyword for, and then within the parentheses we have three different statements. The first statement is executed before the loop, and this is where we initialize a variable, I, and we're setting I to 0. Our second statement defines the condition for running this loop, and right now our condition is when I is less than or equal to 100. And then our third statement is executed each time after the loop, and this time we're iterating I by 1, I++. Now these statements are not required, they are optional statements. So we could have our variable I initialized outside of our for loop up here, and we could still use I in this situation. So let's put our code block inside of our loop to give our loop something to do each iteration it goes around. And so let's just have it console.log I. So each time this loop goes through, it's going to log to the console our variable I, which is going to be a number. And starting at 0, and it's looping all the way until I is equal to 100. So on our first pass through, I is going to be 0. We're going to console.log 0. It's going to go, then I is going to iterate by 1, I++. So now I is 1. This time through, we're going to console.log the number 1. And now this loop is going to run all the way until our condition is met when I equals 100. At that point, our loop is going to break. So let's throw our for loop into a function called loop, and then when we click a div on our HTML page, I'll log to the console I 100 times. Let's go to our page. So I've created a little click me here. When this is clicked, you'll see here down in the JavaScript console, we've logged I each time through the loop into the JavaScript console. So we have starting at 0 all the way to 100, and then it stops. And as I said earlier, these statements up here are optional. So if you do something like omit this second statement here where you're setting your condition, you're going to need to have a break somewhere in your loop, or else we're going to have an infinite loop, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. In this loop right here, we don't have an endpoint, and so this number is going to iterate forever. So let's go to our browser and show you what I'm talking about with an infinite loop. When we click here, that is not good.
Whenever I'm about to do something, I think, would an idiot do that? And if they would, I do not do that thing.
So don't be an idiot and create an infinite loop that's going to crash your browser. It's no fun at all. The last thing I wanted to introduce you to before I end this video is an if-else statement. And conditional statements are basically used to perform different actions based on different conditions. And so within our loop, we could add something like this. We could go if, say I is equal to 5, then console.log the number 5, or the word 5, and then else do our console.log I. So you're going to see that within this loop, every single number except for 5 is going to console.log the number. When we get to 5, we're going to log the word 5. Alright, so let's go to our browser again and refresh the page. So we click here and you'll see that when we get to 5, we have the word 5 just like shown in our conditional. And the rest of them, we have I. So that wraps it up for intro to for loops and conditionals. I will see you next video.